Welcome to another edition of Getting Real, the Getting Real podcast with Paul and Howard. I'm Howard Chung, co-host along with Paul Balzati out of Bellingham. I'm in Mukilteo, but we've got a very special guest. And today we've got our Anacortes Washington expert, Lisa Strandberg, who's been living there pretty much her whole life. And so, I know everybody out in the world seems to have heard of the San Juan Islands. And Anacortes is the biggest city right there on Fidalgo Island, which is part of the San Juans. And people are discovering it, and even I am finding out that, there's this rain shadow effect even, so you get a little less rain in Anacortes than you do in the rest of like kind of the I-5 corridor. And people are just finding Anacortes, and it's in Skagit County, but it's right in between Island County and San Juan counties. And so we just want to talk about the city and life. And Paul, I mean, you've known about Anacortes, just like living also in Whatcom County, right? A little bit north, only about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes north of Anacortes. I mean, what have you known about Anacortes, since the time you've been in Bellingham?
I've always loved Anacortes. I've always kind of looked at it essentially kind of like a very similar to Bellingham, but smaller. That's kind of the way I've always envisioned Anacortes. And the reason I wanted to make sure we had Lisa on to talk about Anacortes is when I first started working with Lisa, obviously she's been in real estate a long time in the market, but her enthusiasm about the area is really something. And so I've learned some things from you already, Lisa, so that's why I wanted to have you on to talk more about it. So tell us about, growing up in Anacortes, when you got into real estate, a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Anacortes, graduated from high school here. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I went to school up in Bellingham. I went to Western. Thought I'd be teaching here. Thought I'd actually be a special ed teacher in Anacortes, but I got into real estate about 25 years ago instead. So growing up here was amazing. We are so close to Seattle and Vancouver and, with bigger cities if we need, but we have everything we need on this island. And that's kind of one of those things that if you don't have it, a neighbor will help you figure out a way to do without it, right? So there's really no reason once you move here that you really have to leave. One of the things I loved about growing up here, I guess just, you can get lost in the forest lands. You can go hike Mount Erie. You can go swimming on one of the many lakes or the beaches. Boating, that was an everyday thing in the summer, crabbing and fishing and water sports. It's just a really fun place to live.
We know it's developed a lot. We know it's grown a lot, but it's still definitely, the geography of it, it's still just this certain size where it doesn't seem like it even has the ability to expand out of a certain amount. It's this finite area and it still has that kind of small town charm. So how would you explain the growth of Anacortes? I mean, would you say from when you were born to now, has it really changed or has it kind of stayed the same?
Well, it's interesting because it is an island. It can't grow, right? We have a self-imposed moratorium at some point where you can't build it more. But there were, 2 stoplights in Anacortes. There were not as many homes as there are now, like the developments, which I played a big role in. I think it's how you develop. Someone's going to do it. It's been a lot of fun to see that happen. It used to be a lot more working class, I think. I mean, my dad was in the Navy, and when he retired, my parents bought a house out on the waterfront by Deception Pass because they couldn't afford a house in town, right? Houses in town were like $40,000. Their waterfront house was like $20,000. So that's changed significantly. They had 3 daughters. It's what they could afford. And there were a lot more working class, not as now. I think our demographic is mostly retirement. We're mostly a retirement community. And it's a lot harder for young families, I think, to afford homes here in Anacortes. But the quality of life is why people live here. You could let your kids go play in the streets. And we have wonderful schools. Our school district, we've passed a lot of levies and bonds. So our community really supports that, which is nice.
I've always just gone to kind of Anacortes as a pass through, right? And I think a lot of people kind of recognize Anacortes. Oh, that's where you take the ferry. And my town where I live, Mukilteo, is kind of the same way. It's just like, well, that's how you get to the ferry to get to Whidbey Island, not realizing, wait a minute, let me take a look at the town. And you mentioned Deception Pass, and it's just like, oh yeah, Deception Pass, right? At the north end, of course, Whidbey Island, which, by the way, I found out was the fourth largest island in the continental United States. Okay, that's a little fun fact recently. But then you go through Deception Pass, and then you're in the heart of Anacortes. And instead of just taking another ferry right over to, the San Juans, stay right there in Anacortes, explore downtown, explore, some of the hiking trails, and you don't have to pay $100 for the ferry to get over and back.
We are the gateway to the San Juans. That was, people would just come here, and then once they move out to the San Juan Islands, and I have a lot of friends out there that I've helped over the years move back to the mainland, because when you're dealing with tourism or healthcare or finding different things that you might need, it gets really hard. If you're having to visit the mainland quite often for doctor's appointments, and then the ferries are running late or they're canceled, or you could be in that ferry line for 6 or 8 hours. There's no guarantee you can get on or off the island, without a plane or a private boat. So I think people really have started to realize that our healthcare is wonderful here in Anacortes. Island Hospital does a great job. Also, it's just a 90-minute drive to Seattle if you need a specialist. So that we don't have here, if we don't have it here. So I think, while that island lifestyle is really, it sounds amazing, and it is amazing. I know a lot of people that love it out there, but it's nice to not have to rely on that ferry.
Anacortes seems to kind of have it all. So I am actually just very excited about the growth in the town. But you were just saying that, there has been so much growth. There's some questions about the affordability side, and a lot of people are retiring there. And so, I mean, what spurred that on? I mean, just people are just kind of organically finding it. I mean, what do you think is happening, just in terms of the retirement, I guess, community, or the thought of retirement there?
I think a lot of people move here with the idea of boating. They want to go up, and so we have marinas all around. So it is really what people, actually, it's even better once you get here. But we've Wednesday night sailboat races. So people, I think they move here for a lifestyle, and then I think that lifestyle is everything they thought it would be before it exceeds what they thought it would be.
Lisa, when you are when you're meeting with a buyer for the first time, when you're kind of giving them that first spiel, when you're sitting down with them and they're just coming into Anacortes, and they've been through a few times, like we've talked about, they've been on a ferry, that kind of thing. What are you sharing with them? And then in general, what do you feel like happens the most, as far as there's like a general perception of something, and then what are you kind of sharing with them that's different than that?
The island, Bell Island, it has little microclimates. So like my folks live out on the south end, and in the wintertime, they have so much passive solar that their house gets so hot, they're opening their doors, right? In the middle of winter. I'm on the west side. I get a lot of fog. It's kind of a trade-off, fall and spring brings a lot of fog, but the Skyline Marina, but we have the most fabulous sunsets. So, there's a pro and con for every side of the island. And whether you're a morning person, the sunrises over Mount Baker are, with the light shining on Mount Baker, it's just gorgeous. So there's not a bad place to live, but there are definitely things, it's 10 degrees warmer in town than it is at my house most of the time. So, just those little things.
That is so interesting. Yeah, because Brent over by our office, that's what they were saying, is it's less windy and warmer in that location versus the west side then.
Yeah, well, and that depends. I mean, prevailing winds, so it can be a little bit windier in town. But I'd say it's warmer for sure. I drive into town in the morning and I'm shedding my sweater before I ever get here. It's foggy at my house and totally socked in, but then town is just, downtown is beautiful.
Let's touch on the real estate market in general. So it's an expensive place to live. It's amazing actually looking at the performance of Anacortes and how consistent it's been. And especially even now looking at housing, a lot of markets around the country, and even in Washington State and even in the Northwest, I have seen price depreciation over the last couple of years. Anacortes has held up really well. So talk to us about the Anacortes real estate market.
Yeah. Again, I go back to quality of life. It's a lifestyle. It's especially during the pandemic, a lot of people had second homes here that they turned into their primary residence, and they've just decided to stay. It really is. I don't know any other place that has done so well, at least in the Northwest, in real estate. It's funny that I was pulling some stats on that, just a fun little statistic here when I first started in real estate, which was 25 years ago. In 1998, we had a different market, right? So that was the .com. Everybody had a lot of Microsoft coming up and second homes and everything, and then of course that bubble burst. But in '98, we sold a total of 12 units that year, homes and condos, and the median price was $192,500. So, and I don't remember back then the interest rates were 8 to 10%. Not that we're not there now, but not quite. But then you fast forward to today, 25 years later, and just right now, year to date, we've sold 215 homes and condos, and the median price is $900,000.
Wow.
It's done quite well, Anacortes. And I think it's going to continue. I mean, again, like you both pointed out, and we know we're an island, so they're not making more of it, right? There's only one place to go, and that's up.
That's simple. That's simple supply and demand, right?
Yeah. And one thing too about Anacortes, we've been so great to set aside literally thousands of acres that will never be developed. They're Anacortes city forest lands or the community forest lands. And that will never go away. So, the forethought when they did that was amazing, because that's what makes our island so beautiful.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is, being in Bellingham, we have major homeless problem. Obviously, Seattle, major homeless problem. I know that it's, the bigger the city, the more likely you're to have, more homeless. But it's been remarkable the more time I've spent in Anacortes. I don't see any of that around. I'm sure it exists.
The city definitely steps in and helps when they can. We've got some wonderful resources for people facing hardships. But also it is so far off the beaten path that we do have a certain amount of homelessness, but not like Bellingham. I guess it's just too far to come, too far off the beaten path, I guess.
Well, hey, everybody, if you're watching this, you are now convinced that Anacortes is going to be your next destination, either for a day trip, right, without having to go to the San Juans and just discovering Fidalgo Island, right, which you can get through by bridge, obviously, or possibly even a consideration for owning some real estate, right? And so if you are interested in that at all and getting a tour and just getting some insights, local knowledge, Lisa Strandberg is the person to reach out to, right? But we have an entire office at John L. Scott Anacortes, and we're very, very happy that you are listening to this and curious about the Northwest and the San Juans and, of course, Anacortes, Washington. So, Lisa, I just want to say thank you for your time and your knowledge and your commitment to the local community.
Absolutely. If they just take the time, if they've just driven through on their way to the ferry, they miss out on all of the fabulous restaurants, the wonderful boutiques, the amazing forest lands, the day hikes. There's something to do for everyone, really.
All right, everyone. Well, if you're curious again about real estate, property management, or just to come visit the island, again, come visit us at the website. Click like and subscribe, and we really appreciate you. And we look forward to seeing you here in Anacortes.